Tell me about this webinar, Amy.
Well, I'm doing a webinar to teach hiring managers how to hire and how to work with recruiters. If you think about it, most people who actually ever hire people have never been taught how to hire people. If they work in a really, really large organization, they might have had a class on it eventually. But most people learn how to hire from the interviews that they've personally gone through. And so I'm starting a free webinar to teach people how to hire. I'm tired of the frustrations that are experienced because people don't know how to hire, don't know how to read a resume or a LinkedIn profile, or how to get clear on what they are looking for. And it's just a waste of time and resources. So I'm like, I can teach people how to do that. So I am. So
No,
this is good
that's
practice
amazing.
for me.
No, I'm glad. I'm so glad. So something like having gone through a lot of interviews myself, like I'm sure most people, it's easy to only think of it from my point of view, from the point of view of the interviewee. But that's very interesting that you talk about the interviewers not really knowing what they're doing, and because they automatically are kind of put in that position of authority from your point of view. If you're the applicant, you're like, well, I'm on the outside looking in, so this person must be an expert. If they're the one interviewing me, they must be an expert. Maybe not
No,
so much.
no. I'm writing a 6-part series on it. And I'm offering coaching to hiring managers on how to hire. Because the last year in the recruiting world, the hiring world, you have companies that are paying thousands for job posting and ads and recruiters and fees. Um, and you have candidates, like a massive amount of candidates in 2024, professional candidates that haven't been able to sit in front of a hiring manager. You have such a big disconnect. Like, why? If you have like hundreds of people looking for a role, why does it take 6 months to find one person? If you have 152,000 applicants, and that's the reality. That there's a huge disconnect, and you can coach. Candidates need coaching. Hiring managers do too. It's the reality. So,
No, that makes perfect sense. Yeah, when I was going through my interviews, when I was trying to break into the Salesforce ecosystem, I could tell I could tell that probably a handful, I would say maybe 15-20% were pretty squared away. They knew what they were doing, but the rest, I just felt like they were just as nervous as I was, and they were just
yeah,
sort of throwing it together as they went.
100%. Or you have someone who maybe they worked for this company for 15, 20 years, and they only know what they know, and they're pretty rigid and stuck, and they believe that the best way to figure out who a candidate is to apply pressure, and research shows that's the opposite. So, like, I don't know how many interviews I've sat in. Some really good hiring managers have asked me before, sit on my interviews. I want you to give me tips. Let me know what I'm doing well. Let me know my team. And those are great hiring managers. They learn, and they end up hiring people a lot faster too because of that, and keeping them. But then you end up sitting in an interview. It doesn't matter if the CEO of a company is there. It does not matter if it's someone who's been managing people for 20 years or somebody that's 2 months in, and they do not know what they're doing. They might have a page in front of them with questions, but are those the right questions? And do they know what the answers to those questions mean? Do they know what red flags they're looking for? And yeah, it's wild out there. So I decided I'm fed up with that, and I'm going to do something about it. So,
I'm glad. I'm glad. I wanted to go into because I know you have some fun stories. How did you get into headhunting and I don't know. Is it HR in general? Is that kind of how you are? How did you
so
start?
okay, someone who went to college for HR would would say that recruiting is not HR, but recruiting is a function of HR. And when I started, it was in the 2008 recession. Well, it was 2010 by then. and we had moved to Kansas City, and I was looking for a job. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I studied music and knew I didn't want to be a teacher. And I walked into what would have been known as a labor hall, a day labor hall. And
I'm quite familiar.
and you're in the middle of a recession. So you walk in to a business and there's like 50 to 100 people in there, mainly men, rough backgrounds, people that are maybe some people that were straight out of prison. Um, and they would do work no one else would do. And you had to, I really, like, I remember when I walked in there, it wasn't the prettiest office. It was not on the best side of town, but I liked the fact that, um, every day would be completely different. The people would be very different. And I didn't realize how much I would learn. My first boss, Bruce, he would sit me down next to him and he was like, okay, it's 5 o'clock in the morning. Everybody shows up. The room's full of people. And he would be like, now look over there, look at that person. And you're going to look them up on the computer. You're going to look at their application. These are the skills he says he has. We need 5 people to go do this. Like maybe they were going to go clean up a construction site, or they were going to a retail store before it opens and set up all their shelves and put a retail product in. Or maybe we needed 2 people to go flag, like for Liberty Mutual on the side of the road with the banners for 4 hours. Um, or maybe a landscaper called and they needed somebody to do snow removal, or mow a lawn or something of that nature. And so he's like, you're gonna look at the individuals, you're gonna look them up, you're gonna see the order that they signed in for the day. You're gonna see who has a car, who doesn't, who needs a ride, and then you're one by one, you're gonna call them up. You're gonna visually look at them and see if they're impaired or not. And then you're gonna look if we run a background check on them. If they have, like, if they're going into certain areas, they need to have a background check. If they haven't or they haven't passed it, and you're going to look at the details because some of these details are passable, some are not. So it's like you had like an hour every day. Like, and at that time, you were lucky if you had 10 jobs to send people to work for. You had to choose between 50 to 100 people, and you just pick on that day the best top 10 people, right? Because you want that client to call you back, and the next day you need 2 to 3 people. So you learn to ask questions really quick. Tell me about a time that you have painted before. Do you know? He says you know how to paint. Tell me about the time you painted. What equipment did you use? Tell me about the time you've done landscaping. Tell me what you did. Um, and that's kind of the start of my career was that. And starting in 2010, you didn't have to post a job. You didn't have to, like, there were, for every, like, if you did post a job, you'd probably get 400 applicants for one job. That's how bad it was back then. Right. So, like, you, I mean, I was lucky that I got the job I did. Um, but it taught me a lot about people sitting in there asking questions. I could also sometimes, you'd call and, the next morning you need 5 people to go to Fort Leavenworth and they would need to unload a moving, right? So they had to pass background checks. At least one of them had to have a vehicle to get there. You'd pay them for their gas. You'd have to tell them on the phone, this is what you're getting paid. This is what the job is. Are you able to physically do this? This is what you need to wear. I have this and this and this for you, your PPE, your protective equipment. And you'd call them the day before, and you became really good at figuring out who wasn't going to show up. Oh yeah, I'll be there. And you just know, you heard the tone in their voice. They're not going to be there. I need an extra 2 to 3 people then. And so it was a study in reading people. And I do think, like, my background growing up, living in an RV, traveling all over the country, visiting different churches, prepared me for that, right? Because our parents are missionaries. We wouldn't get support if we didn't behave, even as kids, the way those churches expected us to. So even as a kid, I didn't realize it, but you're looking around, you're walking into an environment and you're reading the room and you're figuring out what behavior is acceptable, what isn't. and who's friendly here, who isn't. And so the same stuff applied. And so as time went by, that was probably the most educational job I ever had. Um, because I also had to deal with problems when they came up. When somebody did something stupid, I had to figure it out. Um, you learn more from your mistakes than you do your wins, day in, day out. And you don't get to your wins without the mistakes. But as time went by, I became in charge of my own recruiting branch, my own daily office. And I started focusing more on my long term clients, people that were going to hire people within 90 days, people that, um, maybe had roles that were really hard to fill. One of the hardest jobs, one of the hardest positions to fill, there are two of them, was a plastics manufacturer that made plastic bottles. And they worked in 12-hour shifts. The hardest position to fill there was the person who sat for 12 hours at the table and looked for the caps that were bad. They had to pull the caps out. It was a really boring
Yes.
job. And at the time, that job, like minimum wage, was like six something. That job paid like $8 or $9 an hour because it was so hard to find somebody that would come in day in and for 12 hours, 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. or 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. And then the other one, I would say dishwashers, like at a university, dishwashers at a restaurant. Those were very hard to fill positions. Nobody wants to wash dishes 8 hours a day.
Yeah, not a very glamorous
Nope.
job,
But you learn really
unfortunately.
quickly, like who's going to do it and who isn't, who's going to get bored with it, who's going to do it for 3 days and give up. But maybe they only need somebody for 3 days. It's fine. So that's how it started. And then it turned into more professional roles over a period of time. But I got to see everything you could think of. I learned a lot by finding work for people. So
I love that because that is such a scrappy in the trenches kind of a way to start. And I've I've had that experience with different things in my life, not on purpose. It was just the way it worked out. But looking back, I'm so thankful for it because you learn things when you're in situations like that that just I don't know how to describe it. It's just
mhm,
scrappy and it's just you're just figuring it out and it's terrible and it's also the best thing in the world, but you learn so much from that. I love those stories. And honestly, just from my experience being around, people like that, people maybe they're just, fresh out of the clink or
yep,
down on their luck. You run into some of the best people who
yep.
have incredible perspective on life. I've learned so much from interacting with people like that. They get obviously a bad rap and they get shit on a lot, but there's some of the best people you'll ever come across.
I would agree. And I remember like thinking, okay, I'm in my office. Sometimes there's the only woman, like 5 o'clock in the morning, in a room for like 50, 60 guys. Half of them, just came out of prison or have been in prison. They have a record. You know, I felt like if you treat people well, they know you were being fair with them. They had my back. They they are wonderful people. They are wonderful people, and some of them made bad decisions. Some of them, um, didn't have the opportunities that people did starting out. Some people got out, I would say, of their situations, and I do see employment as a way that people do move out of those situations. I think that's the wonderful thing about work, the wonderful thing about employment.
Oh, 100%. Do you I mean, when I was applying uh this is probably what 6 months ago, a year ago, some of the job applications that I would fill out or the I'm sorry, the posting would say people with criminal records are encouraged to apply. And that I'd never seen that before ever. I don't know if that's a new thing, but do you see is that sort of a trend? Are employers more open-minded nowadays to stuff like that? Is that a, sort of a
I
new
think
thing?
they're more open-minded than they used to be. So 2008, right, the recession hit. So employers put all these barriers in place because they had to screen out. If you have one position and you have 400 applicants. So background checks got really, really intense and very complicated set of drug screenings at that point in time. Then come around 2012, 2013, the market shifted, and out of the blue, especially with blue collar labor industries that in prior years wouldn't take someone if even if the person they checked on the black box that they had a record, but even if it had been 10, 15 years in prior years, they wouldn't have hired them, they wouldn't have ever given them time of the day. That really really changed in 2012, 2013, and I would say the last 5 years that's been even more impactful, um to where it's I mean, I used to, have to find my own clients. And so it was common for me to, talk to someone in HR, hiring manager, and ask them, what does the background check have to cover? What would you allow? And it would be very telling. I'd either get the response, well, we don't accept any criminals here, and which is not a knowledgeable response, mind you. Because there's many different types of background checks. And versus a very educated environment will be like, oh, we don't allow any violent offenses in the last 7 years. We will allow a misdemeanor for A, B, C, and D, but not for for this and that. We'll allow a DUI if it's been 3 years. So you have those type of situations now where employers are much more open. And in certain parts of the country, um, it's like state of New York, the city of New York, employers have to prove that they have a reason to decline somebody from a job if for having something adverse on their background check. Like they have to prove, like, if this shows up on your record, like you wrote a fraudulent check, right? They have to prove that their job requires you to have a very clean history in that regard. So if you were working in a warehouse and you had nothing to do with money, they couldn't use that against you in the hiring process. um, which makes sense. Like, why would you send all these people to jail? They serve their time, they come out, and there's no work for them. And then you find that across the board, you need employees. You need employees that work hard, that do these things. But if you expect everybody to squeaky clean, that's just not possible. It makes sense that that adds up to the offense. I was
Yeah,
assuming you wrote a
100%.
bad check's not going to work at a bank, but work in a warehouse. Yeah, work at a
Yeah.
grocery store, unloading boxes. Like, and that was another one that was really hard to find. Was people just to unload the deliveries at Walmart.
Oh
Super hard
yeah,
to
I can
find.
imagine. Well,
So yeah,
about the criminal history thing, like it's so easy if you grew up very comfortable and you went from a very comfortable household to college very comfortably and then into a career and you've never been desperate. You can't really understand why people do certain things. And when you grow up just the opposite of that, in desperation, and you've had to fight for everything you've ever had, yeah, you're going to do some things that probably get you in trouble. And like you say, okay, maybe you go to jail or prison, and then if you come out and there's no work for you, well then you're right back to that same desperation. it
yeah,
does it doesn't make any
yeah,
sense.
yep, yep,
Interesting. Yeah, that answers that question because I was actually encouraged to see that, and I just didn't know if that was a new thing. So are you so with the new thing with the webinar and stuff? This is the beginning of a new company for you, is it not?
Well, yes. So I started my own company now that I've moved away from corporate. And like I've been headhunting for many years now. I worked with hiring managers for years trying to custom tailor who they need. And that's for even finding dishwashers. You have to figure out who you need, who can do this for hours on end, what type of person enjoys this role, what's a good pay rate for them, um, to a higher level position. It's not that different. And anybody who tells you it's more complicated, it's not. It is a job is a job. You have to figure out what somebody likes, what they hate, um, their style of work, if they like to initiate new things, if they like to follow processes already there, if they're very happy doing the same thing over again, if they need change every single day, what technical aptitude. It's always questions and finding somebody who meets those questions, right? Um, the one paradigm shift for me this year, and I would say if you talk to any person who's been in the recruiting industry for a long time, 3 years or more, there's a frustration when you know you've talked to someone who can do a job that is a great fit, a great candidate, and you screen the candidate, you send their information to a hiring manager who barely gives you the time of the day, and they don't even look at that person's resume. And they look for every possible reason why they shouldn't talk to somebody. And it's the same person that tells you that nobody wants to work, the skill set's not there. But there's such a communication gap. The assumption we make that a hiring manager knows how to read a resume, knows how to read a LinkedIn profile, understands what transferable skills are outside their industry that are applicable to their own industry, that a hiring manager is well versed on their competitors. Um, you and the reality is, hiring is very on the hiring manager side. It's very personal. Like I want someone on my team who I get along with. I don't have to manage things like that. And hiring managers will spend more time looking at what doesn't work with a candidate than what does, and that's really the biggest problem.
Is that because are they overwhelmed because there's so many candidates, or is it because they're
I've
unprepared
seen
and
that regardless of too many candidates or very few candidates. Does not matter. It's a total, um, like, right, good cop, bad cop, right? Hiring managers, when they hire, they play in the bad cop field.
so maybe they're just afraid that maybe
They're
they're driven by
they
the fear of hiring the wrong person.
100%. That would
Uh,
be the number one thing. Like a recruiter, when we look at people, and in half the time, like especially when you're looking for a very technical role or a C-suite or a director level role, and you're looking for somebody with this many years of experience in this area that can do A, B, C, and D, half the time you're going to post a job, and it's very rare that the exact candidate that you need is going to actually apply. It will happen, but you'll have a lot of people who apply that are not a fit, and you have to sort through all of those. And so a lot of times you're going to go out and you're going to find the person on LinkedIn. You're going to find out who's open to work. You're going to reach out to that person, right? And so um, maybe by the time, so you spend all day looking at resumes as a recruiter, and you do it in what's this paradigm of what is possible. This person might have the skill set. This person might have had success in this industry. This person, oh, this company does this. I didn't realize that. I'm going to call this person up and see if this is a segment that they've worked on and how they've done it. Um, so a recruiter usually approaches a candidates with possibility because we usually have to search them. We have to screen through so many to get to the one we're going to present to the hiring manager. And then the hiring manager has a different paradigm where they're only looking at the red flags. And in you as a recruiter, like good recruiters, we learn our hiring managers and we get used to figuring out what is a red flag to them. And when we know we have a really good candidate, we will help them update their resume. We will do all the things so there's less and less red flags that pop up because it's like they're looking for ghosts that aren't there. So if you're approaching someone who's operating in fear, who's operating on, oh, I don't want this, I don't want this, I don't want this, but what we think about is what we see, then you're the middle person, and you are the person that's kind of like trying to showcase the possibilities, why this person could be a fit. Why is that? Um, and so I am still headhunting, but I want to headhunt for hiring managers who understand how to properly vet a candidate, how to properly treat them in an interview process. Otherwise, I can spend all day talking to the most amazing people, giving them the best advice. But if I have a hiring manager who has chosen to see the world in a certain way, um, it's pointless. It's a lot of work without reward, and it's a lot of disappointed candidates whose self-esteem is only broken and hurt. Um, and the thing is, I have worked with some of the best managers out there. Like if you talk to their team, if you see how they operate day to day, they're wonderful. They take work off their team's plate. They don't call their team members on their days off. They stay late. They are easy. They're approachable. But then you put them in a hiring process, and they don't operate in the hiring process in the same way as they do as they manage their team. And so you can have a great company and have a great manager, but if they don't know how to hire, they don't have a good streamlined process. They haven't really gotten clear on their skills that they're needing. Like they're going to picture, right? Hire engineers, a lot of engineers. They're going to picture an engineer in their head. And that picture in their head really narrows their line of vision to what's possible. If they do not know how to get, like they can meet with me. These are the top 3 skills I need. I would like them to come from this industry. I would like that. But then I can find them with all those things. They might still look at that resume and find something they don't like and not even talk to that person. One of, there's a mechanical engineering manager, and he wanted to add somebody to his team that had, closer to 7 to 10 years of experience. The average team member that he managed had probably 2 to 3 years experience or less. And I sent him individuals that had 7 to 10 to 15 to 20 years of experience working for large companies, different sizes, engineers that both designed components and also a larger scale product, right? Which changes the engineering process. And I still remember sending him these candidates. He would still, to me, I don't know that they know how to do a bill of materials. Bill of materials in an engineering space is like, it's like telling an accountant, oh, they don't know how to use the SUMIF on an Excel spreadsheet, or like it's basic. It's something anyone can learn without being an engineer. Why would you not interview somebody because of something like that? Right? Um, that happens. So then you can coach candidates all you want all day long. If a hiring manager isn't actually clear on what they want and they don't communicate it to whoever's recruiting for them, it's like trying to hit a target blindfolded and get a bullseye. It's guessing at what they want. And sometimes they don't know what they want. So I'm building process because I want to help them get clear on what they want, because they're going to waste less time. The candidate's time, their own resources, they're going to be more empowered to act. And I'm trying to get people to realize that if you continue with that mindset, you're only shooting yourself in the foot. And in the longer you go with that filling role, right? That manager is working extra hours. Their top performers are working extra hours. It costs people their time, money, resources. You get more turnover, all the above. So, I'm not to this in that part. I believe the hiring process is very broken. Which means on the candidate side, there are still things the candidate should do that to help them kind of step into that world and overcome those barriers, right? There's still things that they need to do.
Well, that's actually it's so funny as you were talking about that. That's what kept ringing in my mind because I've kept you were the person that I went to for advice when I was doing all the applications and interviews, and so probably the before we get into the nitty gritty of like what a candidate can do specifically, what probably the better first question is mindset. Like in general, what mindset or frame of mind should they come at this process with?
Well, I actually figured you'd ask me that. I made little post-it notes, and
Hey,
that is my first point is mindset. Um, okay, so you don't, if you get an interview, you get your initial conversation with a recruiter or anybody from that company. It does not matter what situation you're in. You need to make sure you've meditated that day. You have written all the amazing things about yourself. You need to show up with confidence because they expect a performance. They expect a performance. I've had
That makes
candidates with all the skills in the world not get the job because somebody wrote the feedback. Candidate did not wow me. Which I'm as a recruiter, I'm like, oh my goodness, this is terrible. They were supposed to wow you. That's part of their job. You're not even the hiring manager. I know that. The person who wrote that, but they're supposed to wow you. So if you think about it, this is a very negative perspective, but when people you go to interview for a company, you're interviewing with the hiring manager. We've already delineated the average hiring manager is looking for reasons they shouldn't hire you instead of reasons they should. Which means you can't say a single negative thing about anything. You will freak them out. They're like a deer in headlights. The minute you say something negative about your past job, they're imagining you saying something negative about working for them.
yeah,
And
my last boss was a real bitch. So
so, so they do want a performance, and you can be the best employee in the world. And personally, if I had the magic wand question, I would ask hiring managers, let's not ask for performance, let's ask for honesty, right? Let's make it a fit. Tell me what you want. Ask me questions that make sense. Let me answer them honestly, and we can both decide if we're a fit for each other. Right? That's what we want. That's not where we're at as a culture, as a society. That's not where we're at. So you do have to be mentally engaged, energetic. You have to be ready. You've had to have practiced describing your strengths, your biggest achievements, your biggest areas of aptitude, how you've gotten along with others, how you worked alone, if you've initiated processes, times you've followed other people's processes. You have to be mentally prepared to perform verbally or in video to someone. And that's the reality. I hate it. I think it's a dishonest hiring practice, but that is the culture we live in. I'm working hard to change that, but that's where we're at.
I
Uh,
don't mean to cut you off, but
nope.
I wanted to share this with you. Some piece of advice you gave me, and I actually shared it with my buddy Brian because he was in the
Mm-hmm.
same spot. He was interviewing for jobs and stuff. It's to tell everyone what your take and what your answer is if you're in an interview and someone asks you to if they want you to tell them bad things about yourself, which I think is such a cringy question.
Oh, I hate it.
But I think everyone dreads that
Oh, I
question.
hate it.
And yeah, and you gave me a really good answer that I gave Brian, and he loved it. And I've tried to share it with anybody I know. So if someone so if you're sitting in an interview and someone says, "Tell me your worst attributes" or some bullshit, what should they say?
What did I tell you? It's been a minute.
Well, first of all, like you told me that it was nonsense, that it really was not an
Mm-hmm.
appropriate question,
Nope,
and it
it
was just
isn't.
someone, yeah. And but see, from like I say, from a candidate's point of view, you just assume, well, they're the authority figure, and I better have a good answer, and I better be honest because I don't want to lie, all that. And you first of all said no, it's nonsense, and second of all, it's not a therapy session. Don't give them
Do
just say
not.
sometimes I
Yeah.
think too much, or just give them something
Yeah.
blasé because they're just gonna if you give them the truth, which everyone has bad things about themselves. If you give them the truth, then you're just giving them an excuse not to hire you.
You need to, if you're detail oriented and that's your strength, then that also should be your weakness in this world. I'm very detail oriented, and that sometimes slows me down. Sometimes I really love working in a fast paced environment, but every once in a while, because I work so fast, I've made a small mistake here and there. So you have to phrase your strength in a term as a weakness, because that's going to be okay for them. And then that's what I don't want anyone to lie. I don't want that. But you do have to put on a performance about who you are, what you want, and why that job matters to you. That's the day we live in. 2024 and 2023 professional roles. I read, but just yesterday, 500 million less jobs in professional roles that have been cut since 2023 to 2024.
Five
And
hundred million.
yeah,
Ooh,
globally, right? Because we only have a population of 300. But if you think about that, that's a lot of people that you're competing with. And so you have to know how to explain what you've done, what you want. You have to be ready not to take it personally. If there's some roles out there where there's not that many applicants that are qualified, and there's other roles that you're competing against people who've done this job for years. So you cannot take the rejection personally at all. If you get ghosted, you need to accept that that wasn't a fit. It does you no good to focus on what didn't happen. So you really have to not invest any mental energy on the rejection. Zero. You have to,
Oh,
and that's hard, but that's the biggest
it's hard.
mental shift because you get excited, right? You went, you performed, you did the best for your interview, you prepared, and then you might not hear from them. Maybe they have 10 more candidates to interview that, over the next 2 or 3 weeks, you don't hear from them for a month. And then because one person there had an edge on you, they got the role. Does not mean you interviewed bad. It doesn't mean they're a bad employer. It doesn't mean those things. But you have to just be willing to accept rejection, and you got to keep at it. I think that's really the hardest part. You cannot take it personally.
Oh, that's
Um,
so hard because sometimes you get dragged. There were times when I was in my process, I would be on my like fourth interview and really
yeah.
felt good about every interview. And you go into it nervous like
Yep.
everybody else, but I really felt like every time I had a good connection and really presented myself well. And then you do like four interviews, and then a week or two later, you're every day you're just like checking your email. Oh, I got this. Four
Yeah.
interviews? Are you kidding me?
Uh
And
huh.
then you get the automated email from HR that's like some nonsense we decided to pursue, and it's like,
Can I tell you about the
that's so
automated
hard.
email from HR?
Yes, please.
Okay, just don't take it personally. I always feel terrible if someone's done 3 or 4, 5, 6 interviews, but sometimes the hiring manager, okay, like there are times the hiring manager's on the fence between candidates and does not tell us until it's been so long. And I one time, I had waited like 2 weeks or so to hear on whether this hiring manager is moving forward with the candidate. And so I'm like, okay, she's not interested. She's moving forward to interview other people. She never said she wasn't interested, just her behavior about the candidate. So I was like, well, I'm not going to leave the candidate hanging. So I emailed the candidate. I'm like, hey, I'm so, so sorry. She's decided to move forward with our candidates at this time. Now, mind you, hiring manager hadn't given me any information. Well, a month later, the hiring manager comes back. I want to hire that person. I was like, what? I haven't heard from you about this candidate in 6 weeks. I let them go a while back. So that email, sometimes you get that email because if we were to get on a call with you, we don't know what to tell you because the hiring managers didn't tell us why they didn't pick you.
That's a good point. And I will say this because it stings. I
It
mean,
stings.
anyone that's ever got one, it
Uh
stings.
huh.
But I learned to reframe it, and I was like, well, at least they let me know. At least
At
I'm not going to
least
spend the
they
next
let.
2 weeks
Oh yes.
wondering,
But the thing is, if they
hoping.
barely let and sometimes I almost like wish hiring managers had to do their own rejections for anybody they interviewed because then it it'd be different. It'd be quite different. If they can easily walk away from a candidate because a lot of times they're not the ones doing the rejection. Someone else is doing the rejection for them. So they don't even have to
Oh, so
verbalize necessarily why.
they're one step removed.
Yeah.
So
So
yeah,
they don't
that
get the
makes
brunt
sense.
of that. Um, and there are times I can't. There are times I've been so disappointed in a hiring manager's reaction to a candidate that if I got on the phone with a candidate, I would have lost my cool on behalf of the candidate, and I might have lost my job. And if you're in a cubicle setting with other people, you don't want them overhearing that,
Yeah.
right? Like so I'm going to say that you have to learn to take rejection not personally. I can't explain to you. There are seasons of my career when hiring managers saw me walking into the lunchroom, they would run because they owed me feedback on candidates. And I'm like, we move forward. Am I letting them go? Well, I'm busy. I'm like, well, this person's been waiting 3 weeks. Like, um, so there's a lot of stuff that happens behind the scenes. And sometimes hiring managers will also say things to us that we cannot say to you in a rejection without completely blowing your self-esteem. And that's why that little email sometimes happens. So,
Yeah, it's a saving grace. Well, okay,
yep.
here's another question. This is about mindset, and I feel comfortable asking this because every this is probably a dude thing, and if it's not a dude thing, it's a personality thing.
Mhm.
But I know it's not just me. What do you say to, okay, the person that's looking for a job, and it's like you're afraid to apply to too many jobs because you're like, well, I don't want to just keep applying for jobs because what if one of them pops up and I'm halfway through the application process with this other one, and then
Oh,
I get
apply
hired
to
by.
all the jobs. Apply to all the jobs. Don't be afraid. Apply to all the jobs that I think if you have at least 2 to 3 of the skill sets they're looking for, um, apply. And you might see a job posting that's been open for 100 days. Apply. If it's open for 100 days, it means that somebody's already looked through the rest of the applicants and have not moved forward in the process with them. You could be the next person. So apply. Um,
Okay.
apply. And then now my pet peeve on hiring managers or a recruiter is when they do call a month later after you applied and expect you to remember all the details of the job on that initial conversation. And you're just like, I don't even remember applying here. And that expectations. I, as a recruiter, have never done that. Mind you, I get on fun. I introduce myself. You applied for this a while back. I don't know if you're still interested. Here's the job description, blah, blah. Let's get on a call. I'll tell you all about it. But, um, yeah, yeah, that's frustrating to me, when people do that.
Yeah,
Oh,
I've definitely been in that position uh, where essentially I feel like the expectation is that I'm supposed to stroke this guy's ego
yes,
about, yes, I've spent 2 weeks researching your company and I know who founded it. And it's like, come on,
I
man. Like, I've applied to 100 jobs. I don't have time to research you and your company.
exactly, exactly, exactly. So that initial communication, if it's from a recruiter, feel free to reply back. Oh yeah, I've been applying to many, many jobs. Can you just refresh my memory? And it's key. It's super key to the process is when they reach out to you, you're polite, you're respectful. If it's been forever, but you're still looking for a job, always say yes to the conversation. Always say yes to the conversation. But I apologize. I've applied a lot of jobs the last few weeks. Can you refresh my memory on the position? Um, and that would be the best thing to do at that point in time. Um, a good recruiter is not going to hold that against you.
Yeah, you can't expect people to keep up with that. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
When you're
But
applying
I
for that
mean,
many jobs.
if they do, I think to me that's a red flag. But that's it. If you picture yourself, you're a human. Each one of us is a unique puzzle piece. None of them is exactly the same. And when you go through an interview process with a company and it doesn't add up, you get rejected. You have to trust the universe that there's a reason for it, that you weren't the fit for them. And that's not on you. They were a different puzzle. You're meant to be in a different puzzle entirely. And no matter how much you match the job description, working for someone, giving them 40, 50, 60 hours of your work week, there's a lot more to it than just having the skills, right? There's so much more to it than that. Um, I do think, I think the strongest candidates out there really, really know who they are and what they want. And when they go and interview with a hiring manager or a recruiter or whoever it is in that company, um, they have that candidates dug in really deep to what they do not want to repeat in their life. They know if they like to be in an environment where there's set processes, if they like to create them. They know those things about themselves and they interview the company.
Yeah,
And
that's
that's
it. That's advice you gave me early on, and you
mhm,
said basically it's as much you interviewing them as them interviewing you, and that definitely sort of turned it on its head for me. And
Yeah.
I guess like what are the appropriate questions? Like are there certain questions that you ask during certain
Um,
phases?
I
You know?
honestly, the first initial contact, like, my thing is, you have a job description. I read your job description. You reached out to me saying you're interested in talking to me about the role. Um, Tell me about the role. Um, I read the job description, but I would love to hear what you entail the role. Before I ask a single question about my experience or any of that, I want them to tell me about the position and the company. Um, that's on an initial phone call with someone, right? The first base, you're asking them questions. If you if you were dating someone, um, if you know that you're a valuable, high value woman, high value male, right? You go on a date, you are asking questions about this person. So, you weren't just letting, like, you have standards, right? So you start off from the get go asking them to tell you about the job and the company. Um, and then, okay, I'm interested, right? And if they try to turn things around and ask you questions about yourself before you get to the point, well, I still have some more questions before you get into that, is what I would say. I kid you not, it increases your value level to have the questions. But if you know, you have to know, like, I'm an initiator. If you put me in a world where I have to follow someone else's processes 100% of the way, I want guidelines. I want to build my own processes. I will be miserable, and whoever's managing me will be miserable because I will be improving everything every day, complaining about what's wrong. That's me. Okay. Um, so if you need someone to improve your processes, I'm your gal. If you need someone to just go in there and improve things, I'm your gal. Put me in an environment where I have to follow someone else's processes and turn off my brain and not think, I'm going to be miserable as can be. And I will also complain to the manager all day long. Right? So I'm an initiator. I want a job where I can initiate and create processes. And I remember interviewing for an executive recruiter role. Where I'd get to recruit for all their internal corporate positions. And I still remember my interview with the person that would be my manager. And in the big thing that turned me off was, I asked her, so when there's a problem, I like to help initiate solutions. And I've been hiring at this point 10, 12 years by the time I interviewed with her. And, oh, you would create processes and solutions? No, that's my job. That's my job. And I'm just like, oh, automatic turn off. You expect me to hire C-suites, directors of sales, and I don't get to create any of my own processes? You're not that big of a company. If I have to blow my nose before I can do something, like ask you permission to do that, then we're not going to work together because you don't let me bring myself fully to the table. But
Oh,
then
that's
you
so.
have,
Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but just
yeah, go
because
ahead.
I want to tie it back in. That is so. Hearing you say that is so good, but it's so hard to have that mindset when you're the candidate because you just want a job so bad, you
Okay.
know.
And
And it,
I thought about that too. You have, if your unemployment's run out and those type of things, get, go work at a grocery store, do whatever you can to bring cash in. Some of the funnest jobs in the world are ones that don't pay you well, but you're in a team environment. And if you have a side gig, it'll boost your self-esteem. A side gig that you're doing well, it'll boost your self-esteem. It'll help you interview better, hands
yeah,
down.
no, that
That
is true. Yeah, getting it's such a paradox, but getting a new job if you are currently employed is so much easier than going from, oh shit, something just happened and I don't
Yeah,
have a job and now I need one. Like it's a whole different mindset.
it's a whole different. So you have to really focus on staying in that mindset. So I would go work at a grocery store. I would do DoorDash. I would do Uber Eats. I would do any of those things. I would go into a labor hall and go get a job where every day I'm doing something different. Anything to build my self-esteem while I'm interviewing.
Yeah, that's good advice. That's solid advice because I can tell you from experience like that. There is just something about even if you have a great mindset and a great perspective on life, if you are actually
Mhm.
desperate, like if your
Yep.
situation is realistically desperate, it's real hard to shake that when you're
It's
interviewing.
incredibly, yeah, 100%. And then that's the thing. And then you get bitter. Then you complain about past employers. You complain about, like, you get in this negative headspace. It does not help you get a job, does not sell your strengths. So I do, yeah, I recommend everyone get a side job. If you're past the point where unemployment's not coming in, um, working a side job, say you're restocking Walmart shelves that night, you will still feel better than if you spend your days on the couch doing nothing. You'll
Yes.
write a better resume. You will have better messaging on LinkedIn just because you've worked on your self esteem. And I would say you have to know yourself. You know, we have to know what you won't put up with. You have to know, and I think obviously someone who's starting their career doesn't know as much as someone who has been in a career for several years. You know, at this point in time, you've had enough bad bosses. You know what you don't want to repeat. Um, I would write down. I would write down all the things I don't want in a job and a manager, and I would write all the things that bring me to life. And I would literally custom tailor. I'd have questions ready to that, like, um, I know I'm somebody that likes to initiate processes. I would ask, how does your team initiate new processes? If there's a problem, are people allowed to create solutions? Is it a committee? I love to work in a team. I don't like to work by myself all day. Um, how are assignments assigned? What is there a set process or system that you guys use to do work? I've had many jobs where I literally started and they gave me a laptop and nothing else.
They're like, good luck.
Yeah. And I'm really good in that world. Give me a laptop, give me the access to the systems I need, and I will create my processes. I'm a happy duck there. I will get annoyed if there's too much training. Like send
Same.
me the training. I want to read it. I'll do it. I'll practice it out. But you got to know that about yourself. And this is the thing. If when you know that you can just be dropped in a world and you can figure it out, you know how many employers love that, knowing that about you. And that's your strength. I can tell about the time I took over. I had 2 days with a recruiter, and then she went on medical leave, and I literally implemented a new applicant tracking system on my third day. Like, usually takes people weeks to do that. Like, there's these moments that if you think through what you hate, what you love, you will figure out how to speak to your strengths, and you will figure out what questions to ask. And my other big one that I think is super important to actually tell if you're going to work in a place that is toxic or not toxic is how do you guys handle when your employees make mistakes? Like,
Oh,
um,
that's a good question.
yeah, I had a boss before. Um, and if you made any mistake at all, and it didn't matter if it didn't cost me money or it was maybe a little typo in an email, she'd walk down the hall and just glaring at you, just glare, which is the most passive aggressive thing. And you're just like, apparently I'm an inefficient, incompetent human because I did a typo on something. Although that's my 300th email of the day, and I hired 12 people in the last 2 weeks. Um, and I implemented this system and that system, and I cleaned up that, and I saved us this much money. She will care about that one typo. I didn't work there very long. I didn't.
It makes you wish you could ask him about their personal life. Are you happy at home? What are
Yeah,
you bringing to the
exactly.
office?
Right. So if you know you will always play to your strengths if you know what you want. Who like your work style. I like to work in a fast paced environment. I'm bored at a cubicle all day. I hate being in a cubicle all day. I like a job where I'm walking out and about. Go be a salesperson. Go cold call people. Like, I love talking to new people, meeting strangers. Those are your strengths. You have to know your strengths and you have to be able to verbalize them clearly and demonstrate them verbally. And it's hard to do that in a resume. It's hard to do that verbally. You have to practice that. Um, Resumes are tricky. Good recruiters will read into your background beyond what you've written on your resume, okay? They will look at the company you worked for. If they've interviewed in your metro area for several years, they will know that the company you worked for uses this system and this program and does this stuff, even if you didn't write it in your resume. So they're going to look be a little more gentle. Hiring managers, they do not know those things because hiring managers work for the same company for 15 years. He doesn't know what that other company's doing. He doesn't know what they system that use, but the recruiter who's interviewed 15 people for that company knows what systems they use and what projects they've worked on. And she's connected the dots, she or he is, right?
So you want to like really spell things out.
You have to spell it out. So, not your job description. And I see this a lot, even for people that have been professionals for years, very successful. They're going to spell out their job description instead of their achievements on the job. I worked at Starbucks right years ago as a Starbucks supervisor, and I could list in my resume that I made coffee, that I kept the store clean. I was in charge of the cleaning of both stores that I was at, even though I have no idea because I hate cleaning, but somehow that was my job there. I got extra hours doing it because I was thorough. But you know what my biggest achievement was at Starbucks? I have two.
What?
Um, when Starbucks first came out with their instant coffee, I remember we had trouble selling it across the country. I was the first store to meet our daily goals in the entire country for sales of that coffee. And I met our daily goals by 9:30 in the morning for the whole day. And I just got fed up and I was like, I'm tired of not meeting this goal. We're going to meet it today. And I did 3 different things. I made everybody on the team do it. We met our goals. I gave somebody a prize and free coffee and stuff, and we made it happen. Um, and then there was another thing, a partnership we did with Meals for Wheels. And if we sold so many bags of coffee, like we were trying to sell so many bags of coffee. And so we partnered with Meals for Wheels and we ended up, this is in California, we ended up selling like more coffee than any other store in the state. And I sold the most pounds of coffee on drive-through. So there's things like that. That's what I put on my resume. Not that I made coffee.
That makes sense. So, it may have been you telling me this, or it might have been something I read because this is what that reminds me of. Is that they said that uh, in an interview, it's best to tell stories
Yes,
because that way that you remember things better. That way, it makes you comfortable, and the recruiters or hiring managers, it's going to stick in their mind. So that
yes,
is the case.
that is 100%. You got to tell your stories. So you need to think through. And obviously, if you're interviewing for a job and you've gone online, you've read the job description, you've tried to uncover what you can, you need to think of like the stories that you think are going to suit that scenario the most, right? They're opening a new branch in this neck of the state. So this is brand new branch they're opening. They need someone who can set up processes and things like that, meet these deadlines. Um, Maybe you're taking over a branch that's been there for a while and they're struggling, they're in red. Maybe they haven't collected on their invoices. That those are the things, those are the wins that you bring from your past into your present. Um, and that's super important. You have to practice them. You practice them in front of the mirror. If you practice telling them to your best friends, but you have to be comfortable bragging on yourself, which is not everyone's preferred method of life, right? And your resume needs to be bullet points, and you need to have 3 or 4 resumes for professional roles in this day and age.
Okay, so again something that I read, and I've been wanting to ask you about this. Supposedly, like AI, using AI for your resume was all the rage for a while, and supposedly it's not so much anymore because recruiters. The article that I read said that recruiters see the perfectly written, obviously AI version of your resume, and they're like, "Oh, well, this guy didn't put any effort into it, so on to the next." Is that true?
No, no. A recruiter only cares if you can do the job. Like we're not hiring professional resume writers.
Okay, that makes sense. So AI is still a valid tool.
Yeah. Yeah, as long
Okay.
as you double check that it's accurate and that it's actually sharing your experience. Like I know when I use AI to write something, like I'm putting in what I want it to say and it's just giving me different options, right? To say in a different way.
Yeah.
right? That's the gist of it. And it's going to help you figure out bullet points. If you're applying for a job where you're not writing very much in that job, you're on the phones all day, how well you write your resume doesn't matter to your job
Yeah, that's a good point.
itself, right? So no, I wouldn't. I say use all the tools available, all the tools available. Um, I don't think there's anything negative in that at all. Um, and I say 3 or 4 resumes because, say, like I'm a recruiter, right? So if I were to apply for a job right now, I would have one resume that focused on technical hiring in the engineering industry, in the electric vehicle and automotive industry, and I get very technical about those pieces in those roles. I would have another one that would focus more on my staffing experience and how I've managed 3 different branches, staffing branches in my career, and I would exemplify how I grew those from nothing to what the last one had made $12 million a year. Um, that those are the things I would bring about, right? My management skills. Um, so you really want to showcase, like if I was desperate for a job right now, 3 or 4 resumes to showcase the different aspects of my career. Also, because different companies, different industries will use different titles. Right there in the US, we don't have um, specific titles for specific roles. Like you could be a control systems engineer in one company, and the other company you do the same thing, but you're called an electrical engineer,
Okay.
right? You could be a quality engineer in one company, and you could be called a process engineer in the other. But technically, as process engineer, you might do quality and process engineering. You'd be a mechanical engineer that does process engineering, but you're called a mechanical engineer. You could be a accountant that does cost accountant, but your title is staff accountant, but you do cost accounting. Um, so some companies, if you are going to work for a company where your hiring manager has been at that company for many, many years and hasn't had themselves to look for a job, I would 100% change the title of my roles on my resume to reflect what that person might be looking for. And you can look people up on LinkedIn. Look at the company, look at the people. You can kind of guess. Sometimes even LinkedIn will tell you who the hiring manager is. Um, but I would do that. It's not the same thing as an employment verification or an application. Your resume is not the same thing as an application or an employment verification. Do you want me to explain that, Rusty?
Yeah, yeah, because I had a
Okay.
question about that, but explain that
Okay.
first, and I'll see if it
So
answers my
your
question.
resume is a representation if you are for a recruiter and a hiring manager. It is actually not used for the purpose of legally hiring you. That is an application. An application is when you go online to the company site, and you know when they make you fill out your work history separate from that resume,
Yeah.
that is an application. And that the application
Uh,
separate should have your actual titles and your dates of work because in their system, they will actually use that to use their background check group to verify your employment if they're an employer that does employment verification. Probably only like 30% of employers do employment verification.
really?
Mhm.
Wow.
Like obviously, like if you have a job that has clearance or security, they're going to do an employment verification. If it's government, if it's a school, if those things are going to do employment verification. If it's a publicly traded private corporate entity, they'll let you know if you're doing an employment verification because you'll have to give them permission to do it
Uh,
once you're hired, once they make you an offer. And that's also your opportunity to go in and ensure everything's correct.
okay, so then I think that's clear. And
Hmm.
so just to like verify, so for someone out there, what you're saying is whatever job they're going for, to have like go through their resume, go onto LinkedIn and go to XYZ company and then make sure
The
that
hiring
whatever.
manager, yeah.
Yeah, and then go to that company and figure out, okay, what do they call the people that do what I do? And
Yes.
then on your
Yes.
resume, put that even though you don't.
Yes.
Okay, so you're using their titles,
Yes.
their words. That way, you're
Right.
not leaving anything to the imagination
Right.
for the.
And
Okay,
and don't feel bad doing that. You're not lying or anything. Do you know how many times in HR I've sat with the hiring manager and been like, what is the title for this role? Well, we should call it this. Well, you can't call it that. That's the industry calls it. But our department down the hall, that's what they call themselves. So we can't call them that, even though that's what the industry calls them. Like companies make up titles all the time. Like if you're a salesperson, you could be called an account executive, account manager, regional sales manager, business development manager, business development rep, sales engineer. You get my drift?
yeah,
Like they're all the same thing.
yeah. No, that makes perfect sense. That way, you're
Hmm.
not relying on the imagination of a total stranger to actually
Yes. Connect
translate.
the
Yeah,
dots.
to connect the dots. Yeah.
Yes. And I
Okay.
understand you can't do that for every single role, but the ones you really want, do that. That's not the same thing as your application or your employment verification. You're translating the title to make it industry appropriate.
Okay. No, that's really good advice. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I have always wondered why. I'm like, well, you have my resume. Why are we doing this again? But that makes
Yeah,
sense. It's two different things.
it's two different things. Yes. Um, yeah. And what other questions do you have, Rusty?
God, a million. But what one thing in all of this, because you helped me out so much when I was in that phase of my life. Um, it seems like what you're doing now is more geared towards hiring managers. So on like on the company side of things, have you ever considered either offering coaching or even putting together materials for the candidate side? Because you know
Yeah,
both sides really well.
I feel like there's a lot of material out there for candidates, like a ton of material out there for candidates.
Oh, and not so much on the other
There,
side.
I think I've seen one person that has anything about interviewing. And let me, I like a few weeks. I sat in on some company interviews, and um, I sat in through three candidate interviews. Nobody introduced themselves to the candidate. Nobody. I had to interrupt halfway point when I realized that was going to happen and ask them to introduce themselves. Um, in every interview, there's only one or two people that were taking notes or had preset questions, and every single person, the interview that actually had the HR person, body language of the interviewers was unfriendly. It wasn't welcoming. There was nobody in every interviewing kind of leading the interview. So at one point, and in a hair, I was invited to sit in. My candidate had to kind of run his own interview, if that makes sense. And that happens a lot.
Yeah.
A lot of times, the hiring manager, right? They'll have you interview. They'll interview you, and over the phone, virtually. Maybe they cut you meet them in person, and then they have somebody else interviewing them, and they'll lead the interview with that person. But then when you go into your next interviews with other people, um, a lot of those people aren't hiring managers. A lot of those people might have not even read your resume or your job description. Earlier this year, I was hiring for a higher level role, and after and this person, we flew him across the country, put him in a hotel, cost a few $1,000 to do that. After the interviews, people emailed their feedback in about the candidate, and it was just obvious that they didn't read the candidate's resume or the job description. These are all managers interviewing somebody higher level than them. Um, one of them was like, "Well, I would like to see somebody from this particular industry and blah blah." Now, the hiring manager did not sit in on those interviews. And he read the feedback and he was just like, did they not get that this person's been in this industry for the last 20 years? Was this like, what questions did they ask? And these aren't managers that hadn't managed people before or interviewed and hired people. These are people that had managed people for years, but they didn't know how to interview a candidate to get through this. So you don't know as a candidate when you walk out who actually understood what you said or who actually, well, they don't have this industry experience. And then the hiring managers, well, they didn't, I don't need them to have that industry experience. None of you have that industry experience. Do you know how often that happens?
Oh, yeah, I can imagine.
So I feel like I get so frustrated as a recruiter walking into situations in hiring where the team isn't clear on what they're interviewing for, where they are not prepared, where they are not welcoming, where they ask questions that make no sense to the job. They don't even know. Like, I had somebody who's been in sales for 25 years, and somebody on one of those interviews, um, the feedback was, well, it seems like the only way they know how to find candidates is through LinkedIn. I sat in all that person's interviews. He 100% explained that he did more than that. And it is so you I'm saying this because you as a candidate, you cannot take it personally if they don't choose you. You just can't.
Oh,
You
yeah,
do
no,
not
100.
know whose feedback is the reason you didn't get it and whose feedback is wrong.
No, 100%. I mean, because when I was going through that phase, I mean, I spent months and months I mean, I don't even know. There's no telling how many interviews I actually did. And like I said, a small percentage, very professional, very locked in, um, good connection and all that. But so many of them, I could tell basically it was like this was a last minute thing. Hey, you got to talk to this guy, and it was hadn't read my resume, didn't care, did it what probably already knew going into it. This was just like, okay, we're going to interview this guy, but we've already made a decision either way. You know what I'm saying? Like it was just
Yeah.
I had to develop very thick skin because most of the time I would just when you're connecting with someone for the most part.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
And
and that's I had one hiring manager, um, and he hadn't been hiring for a really long time, very technical engineer. And I hired 3 engineers for him. And every single one of them, when they got out of their interview with him and I called them and I gave them the offer, they're like, oh, I didn't think I got the job.
really,
His bedside manner, he was just very technical and to the point. Um, and so like I don't know. I really believe, right, that everyone interviews better when people have made the effort to make them feel at home and comfortable and welcomed. Um, they're not. They're more at when someone's more at ease. They can think clearer, give you more accurate answers to your questions. Um, they're also, if they're comfortable with you, they're more likely to be honest with you, and you will more clearly see the red flags.
yeah, I agree. Yeah,
Mhm.
and from my experience, I can say this: it's kind of like the way to get better at doing push-ups is to do lots of push-ups,
Yeah.
and the way to get better at interviewing or being interviewed is to do lots of interviews and
Yes.
just get your reps in. Is pretty much
Yep.
what I found.
Well, and it's an uphill battle for the candidate because sometimes when you're meeting with a hiring manager, they aren't clear on what they want yet, right? They aren't, and so that's why I personally would tell candidates, don't feel bad if you didn't get the job, ever. Don't feel bad because you don't know what happened behind the scenes. Um, Sometimes when you didn't get the job, it's a saving grace.
Yeah, you may have dodged a bullet.
Yes, 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 yes. So yeah, I would make something for candidates, but Rusty, um, my go-to method when I'm hiring, I will interview people who have terrible resumes. Um, I'm looking for the possibilities, right? So I don't know how many times in the last 2 years I've interviewed someone that I thought could be a fit for the role because of the type of experience that they had. Their resume might have been a mess. Um, and then I told them how to update their resume, and they didn't.
You said they did not?
Mm-mm.
Like, oh, they just basically
Yep.
were not open to advice.
Yeah, and even in the
Oh,
last 6 months, the amount of people I've reached out to that I'm like, "Hey, I know you've been looking for a long time. I think you're a great candidate. Can I give you some advice on what to do with your resume?" I've gotten a lot of no responses. So that's where I do, and on one side, I think candidates are tired of being told what to do. If you're actively looking for 6 months, 7 months, a year, all you're hearing is what to do. You're just tired.
yeah, it's exhausting.
Yes. And that's the thing. So I do feel like there's a lot of resources out there for candidates. If you just go on to LinkedIn, hashtag interview tips, you're gonna find a ton of videos, a ton of things. Um, I think that's there. I don't think it's there for hiring managers. And I do think if I'm working on it, I'm doing my first webinar in January. Um, my goal is to improve the hiring process. It's not just
Okay.
interviewing, it's candidate selection. It's learning how to look at a resume for possibility, not for red flag. It is learning to look at a LinkedIn profile for possibility, not red flag. Learning how to research, um, what you can expect. I had a hiring manager once, job opening, right? And sometimes think about it this way. Sometimes as a hiring manager, you're tasked with hiring for a role that you don't know anything about. The company's growing. You need someone who can do this function. No one's in your company's ever done this function. You can't do this function, right? How do you interview for that? You don't know what you need. You can do your research. Um, so I was in that situation. I had a hiring manager come to me. Well, I want someone that has 10 years of experience at least doing this. I had hired for those roles before, so I am knowledgeable enough to be like, okay, well, you can't afford them. They would make as much as our CEO. This particular field has only been active for the last 3 to 5 years. So that did not exist 10 years ago. If you met somebody that had another title and did this role 10 years ago, you wouldn't be able to afford them. They are probably CEO of their own company. So you meet just because they're a hiring manager, they don't know. They don't know what's out there. They Some of them do, but not a lot of them have a clear picture of this is what my competitor are doing in my metro area. These are the 5 other companies that have similar skill sets to me. They don't know that. They might have an idea of 1 to 2, but they could be wrong. I met with a company, and they asked me to go after candidates that have worked for one particular company, and I found them candidates that work for that one particular company. Candidates has the technical skills, acumen, aptitude, has been doing it 15 years, very successful. They interview him. Somebody on the interview panel, I don't like their resume, and hire him because of that.
Wow. Well, okay, so then this begs the question then, what we talked about the mindset on the candidate side. If you're a hiring manager, or not even a hiring manager, I guess if you're just someone at a company and your boss is like, "Oh, by the way, I want you to hire the next so and so," where do you start with that mindset? How do you get out of that fear based? Everyone's going to laugh at me if I hire the wrong guy.
So
What- ha-
the best hiring managers I've ever worked with, um, they weren't arrogant at all, and you'd be surprised. Like anybody, right? You've seen it. So when people get into position of power or influence, it goes through their heads.
yes,
So like curiosity, humility, um, find somebody to recruits in that industry, have a chat with them, ask them questions. Best hiring managers, that's what they do. The worst hiring managers tell me what they want and don't ask any questions, and I have to like fight to educate them on what they're asking me because they don't know.
that makes sense. They probably don't know what they don't know.
Mhm. Yep. And so anybody that if you approach a new situation like you know everything, well, duh, you're gonna shoot yourself. That's not how you approach other areas. So why would you approach recruiting that way? The other thing, say you sometimes you work with a company that's really amazing, and they've not hired for roles on their team for the last 2 or 3 years, right? And a lot can change in 2 or 3 years. So they think they know what they're looking for, but a lot has changed, right? Um, I advise those people to go back and look at their own resume, their own LinkedIn profile, and find the resumes or LinkedIn profiles of everybody on their team. Because what I have found is they have expectations of new people that they don't have of their own people.
Oh, that's a good point.
hmm I've seen it. So like I had somebody. He's a wonderful engineer, but he'd only been out of college like 2.5, 3 years. So first professional role working for this company. Hiring manager's like, he's the top performer here. He's amazing. All this stuff. I find somebody that's 12 years of experience in the same industry, working for a company that was much larger. Um, Kid who has 3 years of experience out of college is like, oh, this person doesn't know anything. Blah blah. This person's never worked another professional job besides for this one company. And the hiring manager is listening to this person and assuming that the person with 12 years of stellar experience can't figure out how to do the job that this person who's only been doing it for 3 years. This
Wow.
happens. This happens. This happens.
Yeah, back to not taking things personally.
Yeah. And so then when I reject the candidate and the candidate's like, I don't know what to tell them because I disagree with the decision so hard. I'm like, this person has been in this industry this long and done this and that they might not know our job specifics of 1, 2, 3. But if this other person who has 3 years experience learned 1, 2, 3, why can somebody with 12 to 15 years of experience in the same industry not learn our job specific 1, 2?
Yeah,
That's what
100%.
that's my question. And is that
How is what's that?
then that person does deserve 10 grand more than the one that only has 3 years of experience. I'm sure that person has a lot more to offer than we know.
Oh, 100%.
Yep.
What do you see as the emerging, like, the hot jobs right now? If you were gonna talk to somebody, maybe they just started college or whatever, they're younger, and they were like, "Wow, where's the future going?" What are you seeing on your end?
AI, robotics, automation. Um, to me, manufacturing, the people who design the robotics equipment that we use to manufacture our goods, our packaging, when the rest of the world has unemployment at 8, 10%, that world is still less than 1% unemployment.
No kidding.
hmm So anybody who makes pharmaceuticals, food processing, any of those things, those are again, we all have to eat. When we get sick, like COVID, big pharma just got bigger. So
That's a good point.
yeah,
So, what sorry, go ahead.
AI, I would honestly, I wouldn't become a software engineer. I'd become an AI or machine learning engineer. You have to
Yeah,
have software engineering, but the reality is AI in a year or two is going to be able to, I need this programmed in C sharp and Java and Python. Like it's going to do that for us.
what is AI? I mean, no one can really answer this question, but I'm a little bit excited and a little bit terrified of AI. Where do you see what is the realistic boots on the ground impact that AI is going to have on the job market, in your opinion?
I think um, roles, companies have been very inefficient. Um, I think AI will replace business analysts roles, business intelligence roles to a certain extent. There's still always going to be I think, a person behind it. But that means you're gonna have to be very high level to do that. Um, I think AI is going to replace accounting to a certain extent. Um, I don't think it'll replace my job yet. It might replace like the initial sourcing of a candidate, but not the actual hiring of a candidate. Because at the end of the day, hiring, as I've established on the hiring manager side, there's a lot of people in it. And AI does not can't read the body language, can't get the nuance yet. That's probably another 20 years down the road. That's not going to happen yet.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, I want to run this past you. That we there's a friend of ours. I won't name names, although he'd be fun to have on here to talk about this stuff. He's been in computers for years and years and years. He's worked for all the top companies. His kids are like college age,
Yeah.
and his oldest son was doing a really intensive, like a boot camp, very very expensive, prestigious boot camp, like academy or something for data analytics, data science, that sort of thing, and got all the way through it. Very, very smart kid. And in the end, and this was through some input from his dad, who's been into this stuff,
Mm,
AI and everything else for years, it has sort of changed gears and is now getting into. He's going to be an electrician. He's gone. He's in trade school now to be an electrician because in part because he found that he enjoys working with his hands and not really staring at a computer screen, but also in part because he's like AI can't take that job yet.
right. I agree. I think trade school is the way to go. You can make six figures plus on the trades. If I was going to go into anything related to software, I'd actually go hardware over software. AI can't innovate. People innovate.
So if you go into the like the hardware side, would that be learning how to design hardware, learning how to
Learning how to
fix
decide the
fix
hardware, the people who design what your cell phone looks like, the microchips, the functionalities of that, the computers, the AI will be able to program all those things, but the people will design it, right? They'll come up with the ideas. Um, data science is cool, but data architecture is better. The data architect
uh
kind of says where the data goes and how it should be organized. So I would say anything where you get to innovate, AI is not going to be able to innovate. It'll take what we know or run with it, but it cannot innovate what we don't make it do. I would say trades. We need trades. We can't replace trades. I think our trades will only get better and better pay as years go by.
Yeah. Well, because less people are willing to do it. I guess that might be changing now because lots because my kids are high school and college age, and I'm hearing a lot of their friends talk about getting into the trades, and we have these conversations, and the kids are very tuned into the AI and the possibilities, both good and bad, I guess.
Yeah.
And my thought is, I'm like, hey, if you enjoy the idea of working with your hands and actually building something or actually fixing something, you can make a lot of money doing that.
A lot of money. Yeah.
Provided that you have the
Yeah.
training and stuff, and especially if you get into it young,
Yeah.
then
And
it's okay to make small amounts of money at first and build your way up.
but like I have several friends who are plumbers. All three of them they're union plumbers. Um and like plum being a plumber, they're commercial plumbers has given them a great career trajectory. They all make great pay. They they have benefits. They um they have a pension still. And by the time they finish like by the time they're journeymen, all their schooling's paid off. They're gainfully employed
Oh yeah, no, believe me, that's
across the
that's
board.
something. Yeah, that's something that I looked into, and just around here in my local area, plumbing or electric. I guess really you could throw HVAC into that also, but yeah, the benefits, the pay and the benefits for even just say 3 to 5 years of experience blew my mind.
Yeah.
And the my disadvantage probably was my age getting into it. If I was 20 years old, because like even if you have somewhat of a proficiency doing that, you're still starting off on the bottom, and so it would be
Yeah.
hard to spend the next 2 years making, 16, 17 bucks an hour, but if you're 18 or 20 or 25, that's not bad money at all. And then, like you say, within 2 or 3 years, you're in the six figures, and you have some autonomy, and you're just going out running calls basically and fixing things. That's
Or
and
yeah, I
making
mean,
that kind of money.
a lot of my friends, um, like they're on long-term jobs because they're union. They'll be on a job for like 6 months to 2 years, building a hospital or a school or like
Oh,
they get
because they're
paid
on the
very well.
yeah, the commercial side, right?
Yeah, that
Yeah,
I would go to the commercial side before I went to the residential side of the trades.
yeah, 100%.
So you can always backtrack to residential, but commercial you'll get well. Some plumbing companies will get benefits and PTO and all that other stuff, but you'll get much better pay and pension the other way. But yeah,
That makes sense.
yeah.
Speaking of the recruiting industry and like the way the job market is changing, uh, one thing that I've I heard an interview about this. The military is having a hell of a time recruiting. Less and less young people are eligible for the military, like physically to be able to go in and to pass the tests and stuff, and
Hmm.
make it through, basic training. And they're actually the Navy is rolling this out, and I'm sure the other branches will implement this as well. But basically calling in either retirees or people that are prior service, that are 40, 50, 60 years old, and bringing them back as contractors to fill certain roles. Have you heard about this?
I've not necessarily heard about that, but I've seen it.
Yeah,
You
it's
know,
it's it's very yeah, it's very interesting to think about that.
I guess okay. So I did. I've met a lot of contractors that work for the military, and in my recruiting, I've interviewed a lot of contractors that work in the military. I think that's always been a thing. I think it's harder to recruit people now than it was in 2001 with
Oh yeah.
September 11th and whatnot. But man, we have like the largest military in the world already. But they
Yeah.
do pay your schooling, your college. My husband John, he has a great career because he went in. He did pay most of his schooling with the GI Bill, and that is a great opportunity, depending on what you're doing.
Oh, 100%. And honestly, the military, that's something I tell, my kids and their friends. I'm like, if there's something you're interested in, you could join the military, and
And learn
as
how to
long
do
as
it
you,
there. Hmm.
yeah, learn how to do it there and have really good experience. I mean, if you think avionics or anything like that, you're going to get the top schools, and you're in there for 4 or 5 or 6 years, and when you come out, you have a ton of experience. So when you're doing these interviews, you could talk for days about, oh yeah, yeah, there's this time that we were up against a deadline, and I did this, and I learned this airframe, or whatever they call it. Yeah, there's some opportunities there for sure.
100%.
All right, so tell me
I
about
think
this
it's
webinar. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
oh well, my webinar is it's kind of my introduction to this. I'm my webinar is going to be free. It is for hiring managers. Um, it is my first webinar ever, so anybody who is welcome to join and critique me and send me feedback. That's great. But it's really a webinar about the art of hiring. Hiring is an art. It should be more concrete, and my goal is to make it concrete. It's to define it right. Make it simple. Help hiring managers figure out what they want, what they need, and not some wish list like they're at the grocery store. Um,
I,
so
I love it.
yeah, that's my goal. Just 1 hour webinar. And then I'll be offering coaching to hiring managers on hiring. And it's a 40-day process basically where I'm going to take them through whatever positions they're hiring for and helping them make it clear on what they're looking for in a person, helping them prepare their panel of interviewers to be welcoming and all the things they need to be so that we don't get unnecessary feedback that costs us a great hire and spends time and money that we don't necessarily have. Um, and about, I want to produce a better candidate experience for everyone involved. I want to help hiring managers be less afraid of hiring and be more empowered to be honest and to accept honesty from a candidate. Um, help them get away from the bad cop routine where the entire interview panel is just staring. Tell me, what would you do? Like, we want to get away from that. We want to be welcoming and friendly and not act like hiring for an accountant has to be this stressful, pressure filled line of questioning. Like, there's all these other assessments you can do to actually find out someone's skill level and knowledge level. Um, Hiring should be about getting to know someone, and it shouldn't be about them performing something that they're not on an interview in order to please you. So,
No,
that's
100%.
yeah,
It needs it needs to change because it's very uncomfortable and you're not
yep.
getting the best out of people. You're really not.
No,
You're
and
just
I
making
think
them nervous.
100%. I think everyone, I think hiring managers and candidates across, I think everyone is beyond frustrated. I read a stat this week that the longer your interview process is, you need the more interviews. And you work for a very arrogant company, you have the best product, which is great. I love your product, all that, but you're not a fortress. If you need a candidate's interview 9 to 12 times to get them hired, you're inefficient in your process. You don't know what you're doing. And research shows that the return on investment, like it degrades in 9 interviews. Like, you've made the candidate nervous. You've done all this stuff. The interviews just are not as effective at that point. And so, like, I'm going to put all that out there in the world. I don't feel like there's a lot of material on this out there, so I'm putting that all out there. I want to help people be successful in their hiring. I've also had that experience as a recruiter where I've been, you know, where I felt like I couldn't even take a lunch in the lunchroom because you'd walk into a department and you'd see your colleagues working 12-hour days, nights, and all. They're so busy and they're understaffed, and it's my job to hire those people for them. And you see the frustration and the culture costs when someone's understaffed like that. I don't want that for anybody I work with. All employees are happier when they have work-life balance. Hiring managers are better managers when they have time to manage and they're not under that pressure. So the world's a much better place if we figure this out.
100%. Are companies able to quantify what it I'm trying to think how to ask this question. Like let's say there's a big company and they have a very inefficient hiring process. Are they able to quantify what that actually costs them, like in money or in productivity? You know what I'm saying? Like if they have like a five.
I think you'd have to have a really good financial analyst to do that. But let me share this with you. Um, so the number two recruitment platforms where companies post jobs are LinkedIn and Indeed. Do you know how much it costs um, for a recruiter to have a recruiter seat on LinkedIn annually?
No, but tell me because I didn't realize they had to pay for this. How much is it?
Oh, it's over $10,000 for one recruiter.
Ten
So say if you work,
10,000 a year.
yes. So if you have a large company, maybe you have 5, 6 recruiters, you- and you're talking about recruiters. You're not talking about the cost to having a job posting. So maybe I'm a huge organization. I have 50 open jobs. Um, for me to have every single one of my jobs posted on LinkedIn Cost me another 100 to 200 grand a year.
No kidding.
And then you can pay extra to sponsor them. So they're the first thing that shows up in a candidate search, right? Indeed, and there's different, like Indeed, you can do like a recruiter seat. So maybe you have 6 logins for recruiters, and then you have maybe 5 or 6 job postings. And that might cost you, 20, 30 grand a month. And then there's settings on there where, like, say a candidate applies. There's settings on Indeed and LinkedIn where they charge the company per person that applies. And then they charge extra to sponsor them so that they show up in a candidate search. Doesn't
That's
that
an
make you
insane amount of money.
angry?
Yeah,
Because, and that's why candidates, when they, candidates, like, there are job postings, there are companies out there that don't have those resources, that they do have an Indeed account, but they're not paying to sponsor their jobs. So candidates aren't seeing them. They're not showing up in the first 15 page of your job search. Okay, so this is going to
yeah,
start another topic. This topic will get a little longer. Okay, if I was a candidate right now, and I know I didn't want to work for a publicly traded company that's ginormous and huge, that I wanted to work for a smaller company because maybe they don't have layoffs and things like that. It is possible that company does not have the resources to post all their jobs, maybe to have them on their website, but they most likely do have like a company page on Indeed and LinkedIn with their spots, but there's not sponsored. So when I show them up, they're not going to show up until like page 100. Does that make sense?
yeah, yeah.
So then at that point, when I'm searching for a job, I'm literally looking, instead of looking for job postings, I'm literally looking at every employer in my metropolitan area. And I'm going to their job sites, their career sites, and I'm seeing if they have a job opening for me.
Oh, so you're searching the company out and
Yes.
just checking because
Yes.
okay, that makes sense because
But
it's so
mhm,
expensive otherwise for them to
it's so
post them.
expensive otherwise. And then that's where also it's like such a big disconnect between the employer, and the employee. Hiring managers, most of them do not know this information. So they might not realize how much it costs. Um, us recruiters 100% know how much it costs. And then say you go through 4 or 5 interviews with somebody, you have an assessment that your company is making them do. That's probably another $25 per assessment. Then if I'm flying them somewhere, I'm paying for a background check and reference check. I'm doing all this other stuff. That's another $15 for something cheap, $120 for an extensive one, another $100 for a drug screen, flights, car rentals, meals, like, does that, like, it's not cheap to
Yeah,
hire.
it adds
Not
up.
not at all. It adds up. And that's not including time, obviously. There's one role I spent I was hiring for a role. They wanted the person to work in person. In this particular role, there wasn't anybody in the metropolitan area I was at that did this. It's new technology. Not a single person in my city did this. So I would have to reach out across the country to people who did this and find someone who would be willing to relocate. And if you even think, if there's a job posting, how do I make that job posting show up in the right places? Right. And this
Yeah,
is
how
when I
do you
lived in
do that?
Kansas City. So, I contacted probably about 1,200 people over the course of 3 months. Talked to probably 200 to 300 of them because a lot of them didn't. Kansas City's not where they would have ever thought to relocate. I had to convince them reasons they should want to, and then put their resume in front of a hiring manager only to have a hiring manager, oh, I don't want a candidate from California. They worked for this company. They had layoffs. I don't like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Right? And I'm like, but he's coming from California. He's got 2 huskies and he lives in a 600 square foot apartment. He wants to move to Kansas City so he can afford a house and for his huskies. And he would take the salary range we have. Do you know how many hundreds of people I talked to, how many people I reached out to find this one person? So I'll get off my high horse now. So there's just a disparity between like the candidate that needs hired now, the hiring manager that needs somebody now for their team, and this like we're a fortress. We got to protect the wrong people from getting in. Like we got to get rid of that fortress thing. We're shooting ourselves in the foot across the board.
No, it really is. It has to be fear. They're driven by fear, but honestly, because like I say, I've never had to hire someone or interview someone in that capacity. I've always been on the other side of it. But I think it's fear. But really, if you drill down further, it's ignorance.
It's
And I don't mean
ignorance.
that
Uh huh.
in a rude way,
Nope.
but they literally don't know the appropriate ways to go about hiring someone, and so then that freaks you out. I would be freaked out too because I'm like, what do I know
Okay.
about that?
But do you know? Okay, there's two types of people. There's a person who knows they don't know and they're curious and ask questions. I love working with that person. They listen, they get better, they ask questions. They don't approach me like I'm an idiot. Love that. And then I have the other people who've hired maybe two people their whole career, maybe 10. I've hired hundreds, if not thousands of people. And they approach me with arrogance and they approach me as though I don't know what I'm doing. And they approach me trying to tell me how to do my job when they have no idea. And that I'm like, and don't get me wrong, I've been very good and successful at still coaching those hiring managers on what they don't know. But why put me in that place?
Yeah.
That with the way I'm going with like, and I will always be headhunting. When I talk to candidates, and this has always been my rule of thumb. When I talk to candidates and I realize they're not a fit for the roles, I still coach them on anything I think they need to be doing to show themselves clearer. I still dig in deep to what they want because I never know if 2 months from now I'll have another role that they'll be perfect for. And I do want to know what they want. I want to know what they hate. I want to know what they need to get paid. I want to help them get to the point where they're telling me about the coolest things about themselves so then I can easily help them relay that to somebody else, right? That's always my goal. I want all my candidates when I talk to them, I want them to feel great about themselves when they leave. That's always my goal, whether they're fit for this job or not. Because everybody is good at something. Everybody's necessary somewhere. Everybody has value. And I believe that to the core. Um, but as I'm approaching the second aspect of my business, which is coaching, mentoring for hiring managers on how to hire, my biggest, I guess, my fear is how do I tell them they don't know what they're doing? Right. I've been taught that, the marketing that I do, it's going to repel the individuals it's not meant to be there for, and it's going to attract the people who do need this help. Um, but that is, how do I tell an arrogant individual who's getting in their own way that they're the reason they're not hiring, that they didn't prepare their team, that they didn't do all the steps they needed. It's not because nobody doesn't want to work. It's not because their pay is not this. They didn't do the work. You know, their ignorance is and their arrogance is costing them. And that's in my marketing for this side of my business. I'm still figuring out how to state that in a way so that those individuals that need my help the most do get it. So yeah.
Well, so I mean, the truth is, I mean, some people you're never, some
No,
people will never get out of their own way, and I guess really it boils down to just attracting your ideal client, the ideal person that you're going to gel with, because yeah, you some people they're just going to do what they do no matter
right.
what.
Right. Some people are going to do what they're going to do. I have so many interview stories. Like a pet peeve of mine is when you show up to an in-person interview and the hiring manager is behind their laptop taking notes, not looking at you or on their cell phone. I shouldn't have to tell a professional who's been in their industry for 20 years to get off their laptop or to get off their cell phone while they're in an interview. I shouldn't have to tell them to introduce themselves. I shouldn't have to tell them, go over the job description with the candidate, please. but I do.
Yeah, no, I can vouch for that. I've had when I was interviewing, I mean there was some people were at home, and this was more like the tech industry, and so
Uh-huh.
a lot of people do work remote, and they would have like dogs walking around barking and kids running around screaming and and I'm trying to give them my life story, or answer their
Yeah,
questions, and they're clearly doing other things and like oh yeah, there's this
right.
guy, he's still talking.
Yeah. I will say this. I don't mind in an initial conversation, I don't mind if a hiring manager has life happening as long as they give you the same grace.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That's the thing because there are times, especially you're going to work remote, that your life's going to happen. Your kid's going to show up. If you know, but the reality is a lot of individuals they want the candidate to show up in a certain way, but they themselves aren't showing up that way, and that part's not okay.
Yeah. So tell me this, because you've spent all these years working in corporate America, doing this function, and now you're branching out, on your own. Like what does that mean for you to build your own business and to offer these services yourself? Like where is that drive and what does that mean to you?
I would say I feel like I can make an impact. I have met so many hiring managers that are so frustrated that they weren't able to find the people they wanted, um, or that they found somebody they loved and someone else on the hiring team decided, no, we can't hire this because we don't like this person's. They have a mechanical engineering degree and we want them to have a systems engineer. Like, there's so many obstacles to hiring. I'm tired of sending candidates, amazing, amazing candidates to organizations and not even giving them the decency of an interview. Um, I guess I decided instead of just being frustrated, why don't I do something about it? So I, I kid you not. I did a meeting with the hiring team, and the hiring manager told me, well, I don't want someone technical in this role, but I want them to be able to work with these technical people because I want them to be able to hand this off to the technical people. And then the number one feedback on another candidate at the final interview was not technical enough. And and the candidate like built motorcycles, like he can understand a CAD drawing. He's been around technical things all the way, but because he's not an engineer, they didn't hire him, even though the hiring manager went on and on about he didn't want someone he wants someone with technical aptitude, but not technical. And this person did have that technical aptitude. It's like, but other people on the interview panel didn't know that about the hiring manager, so the person wasn't hired. And so it's I want hiring managers to be very clear on why they're not hiring somebody and why they are, and not just some, oh, they need to wow me. They didn't wow me. I had another job for an organization, and they literally went on and on about how they needed someone who could sit at their desk all day working without interacting with people. This person would be pulling reports and then debugging, and they would have a lot of social interaction. They'll pulling. So you know what I got? I got someone that they said, oh, it's overqualified. He could definitely do this job. He wasn't very personable in the interview. You
Yeah.
confirmed he could do the job. He just didn't wow you. And he had a great job history. You have an issue. He just wasn't very like you literally told me to find somebody that didn't need to talk to people, and I did. So like that's where I'm like, be clear on what you want and stick to it and hold to your horses. Like people aren't grocery store items. They're not ketchup. They're you don't those are not good hiring practices at all. And it costs the company money and resources. It hurts our entire society when those are hiring practices. So I want to
Yeah,
help
there
candidates find jobs. I want to help companies find the skill sets they need, but I also want to create my ideal client.
No, I love it. I mean, there's definitely a gap in the market for that because, like I say, having been on this side of it, yeah, I can relate to everything you're saying, and yeah, that's amazing. Okay, so how would you said this webinar is in January? How would people sign up for it, and where do they where would they find you at?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn, Amy Kaufman with KE Talent. And I'm an event on it's on January 9th. It's called The Art of Hiring. It's free.
Ooh, I
There's
like that. The art of hiring.
yeah, there's a
Yeah.
Zoom link. Um, it is for hiring managers, but anybody can be participatory in that. It'll give you a different perspective as a candidate. Um, Maybe help your self-esteem to realize that a lot of hiring managers don't know what they're doing. Um, you you're not a failure because you didn't get the job. That's just not the case. Like companies don't know what they're doing either. And I've worked with the great companies that have been voted best of the best in their states, then the Forbes 500. That doesn't mean anyone's ever sat down with a hiring manager and been like, "This is how to hire." Instead, people pride themselves on how picky they are and how tough they are during the interview process. And I'm like, it's not attractive. It doesn't help you retain people. It literally negatively impacts your turnover. Um, I don't want to work with a manager who plays bad cop with me in an interview.
Yeah,
I know
you're
my
not getting the
value.
best out of
Mm-mm.
people. Yeah, you're
No.
not. You're
Mm.
not.
So I think we need to stop doing that. And I would like to be a part of that change. I want to work with clients who want to do better and learn better and want to be efficient. I want to find them great candidates. Um, and then that's kind of my overall goal. So my phone's at 5%.
Oh no, no. Oh no. Well, hey,
It was
I'm
like
glad we're
100% when we started, but
no, that's amazing. Okay, so okay, well, that's totally fine. It's perfect timing. So, the art of hiring. They can find you on LinkedIn, Amy Kaufman. Is there any website or other social media that you want to put out
um,
there first?
KE Talent. I have a page on LinkedIn. I'm in the middle of setting my website. It's not all the way there. It was there. I'm changing it. Um, I really learned recently I can be very successful in my company without a website. So that can wait till later. But yeah, that's kind of my goal. And I appreciate you letting me chat about this, Rusty. I love
No,
talking about
thank
hiring.
yeah, no, thank you. I mean, I'm really glad this has been fun, and maybe we can reconnect again after your webinar, and you can let me know how it went. Um,
Absolutely. You can
yeah.
definitely join if you'd like. Your podcast is going to grow and you'll be hiring people and you need to know what you're doing.
Oh God, it won't be me hiring people. I can tell you that. Oh no, this is amazing, and hey, definitely send any links that you want, and I'll include them in
Okay.
the episode notes and all that. I just that email I sent you is a good one, and yeah, thank you so much. This was amazing, and tell Johnny Boy I said hey.
I will. He just got back from finding a duck spot. So
Oh, good. So he's had a productive morning.
just had a productive morning. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, and I can't wait to chat again next time.
Okay. Thank you,
All
Rusty.
right. Take care.
Bye.
Bye bye.